Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you from the Valley Access Studios in Stillwater. We're beginning our new year in 2018, and I wish you well wishes for the new year. Now, today we have with us Councilmember Loren Sederstrom from the City of Grant. And for you regular viewers out there, you know that we have Mr. Sederstrom here on the program once a month to give an update on what is going on at the Grant City Council meetings, the initiatives that are occurring, the issues that are being discussed, and changes that are being voted on by the council. And so we have an action-packed show for you today. So with that, I want to welcome you, Councilmember Sederstrom.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. There's a lot of things going on. There's more than a little controversy. We have a lot of things to cover. So why don't we've changed attorneys, and the first clip is about that. So why don't we play that clip and we'll go from talking the other side.
Thank you.
To all those watching this tape and those in the audience, Mr. Schneider is a new attorney. By unanimous decision, this council did decide to head in a new direction for our legal services. So Mr. Dave Schneider from Johnson Turner is our new legal representative here. And we welcome him and hope that he has a fantastic new year with us. We're certainly looking forward to having his input on these issues and others. Mr. Schneider, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Council for the opportunity to serve. I was just going to say, whether it comes to questions or answers at the Council meeting, particularly when we're talking about matters as routine as approving the agenda, we have to ask our questions in a way that's calculated to make them successful and fair and quiet and sensible. And if the question relates to the status of the city or legal inquiry, and it can be asked before the council, I'd ask that before the council meeting, I'd ask that be done. I'd be happy to.
It's nice to see that your new city attorney is helping to provide some guidance and direction to the council to lay a groundwork for how they can move forward in the new year, given that they've got new council.
Oh, I would agree. The old Ekberg Lammers, there was too much baggage, there's too much negativity, and they were continually siding with the council majority. And while the council, it's the will of the council majority, it's the voice of the minority that's important. And we're going to give an example a little bit later on how that comes into play and how important it is.
Right, and I think this idea of trying to create a level playing field at the council meeting so that all voices can be heard as part of the process is very important. And that is really the kind of guidance that a city attorney can provide their council to help provide guidance and how that balance is important to city governance.
Well, I think, Diana, we're off to a very good start with this first session, in as far as the attorney. But the next thing that we're going to be talking about is a lot line. There's a lot of old lots that were put together, but we have a minimum of 10 and an average of 5. Well, in the 60s
of acres, right.
And before that, they would split a lot into 2, but they would say, hey, they have to go together. And that's what we're talking about. Somebody that's had a 20-acre lot, the front lot had all the road footage, the back lot had no access. So in 1993, the little old lady switched it, but they never erased the old lines. And that's what this next clip on, so if we could play that clip, we'll talk on the other side.
Understand? Okay, recently we had the lot where there was 20 acres and it was split east-west, so there was no frontage. And then the person requested it be split north-south, so there was equal frontage. And the old lot line wasn't erased. So how does this affect that? I don't understand. I would think that non-erasure of that east-west lot line was a mistake that should have been corrected, so we should have two 10-acre lots. So how does this ordinance affect that situation so I can understand, because I don't fully understand? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this ordinance was actually a direct result of that application that we reviewed. So while this does not specifically, this was not the request of the application. This was the result of the discussion by the city council related to that application. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part of it is that while we can hypothesize that it was a mistake and should have been erased, that east-west lot line, it did not happen. Therefore, the lot line exists at the Washington County Records Department. So in the county recorder's office, they are legally two separate parcels. So why the combination did not happen, we do not know. And when we go back and reconstruct the history of that application process, it's unclear as to why that was not a condition of that application process. Now, when that application went through, it was at a time that the city did not have a frontage requirement. So therefore, that 5-acre parcel, those two 5-acre parcels, one without frontage, one with frontage, both of them would have complied with the ordinances at the time. So those two lots existed and were existing lots of record per Washington County records, right? So because they're both recorded as lots, we have to then go into our ordinance and take a look at how we define existing lots of record.
Okay.
So this would not come into play for any newly created.
My question, Mr. Sederstrom, is that this issue, did it come up because the property owner was attempting to sell one of those 5-acre parcels?
Yes, that's what happened. That's what had happened. Somebody was going to, and of course, they're going to obviously have to have a permanent easement for that has to be separate, because we do not allow joint driveways in Grant in any future construction. Any existent ones are grandfathered in. But what's interesting, what's the next clip is going to be about, is the summary publication. And the city, the majority wants to summary publicize everything. In other words, have 4 or 5 sentences explaining what ordinance was just passed. But look at my comment, and we'll talk on the other side.
And this is with regard to which ordinance
The
now?
one we were just talking about, the lot line ordinance.
Okay, so you were proposing that it should be the full ordinance is published, whereas the majority of the council, they wanted to just publish a summary of it.
4 or 5 sentences, yes.
Yes, okay, so let's take a look.
How much money are we talking about? I believe the last one was approximately $300 or slightly over. Am I correct, Kim? Is that right? It was
Mayor, council members, the last summary publication that was not approved and not put in the paper, it was a difference of, and it depends on how long an ordinance is as well. But it was typically, the summary publication is $32. The last one, I believe it was the solar ordinance, but I can't swear to that. It was $352 to publish.
So we're talking $300, am I correct?
320.
Yep, okay, so we're not talking massive amounts of money. However, there are a number of, there's a preponderance of senior citizens in this community. Not all of them have computers to check it. So I think it's in the interest of transparency, I think on the shorter ordinances that make significant changes, I think it's prudent to put it in the newspaper. As long as the White Bear Press, it's not that expensive. $300 is not breaking the bank.
Okay, well, that's a principled objection. I appreciate that view from Mr. Sederstrom. That was principled, and while I may disagree with it, it was a point well made.
Well, good. I'm glad they recognize that was a principled viewpoint on that. Now, my question that I have, though, is that I understand that, okay, so it costs a little bit more for that publication in the newspaper, but the city of Grant does have a monthly newsletter that they send out as well, correct?
No, an annual newsletter.
Annual. I see, an annual. See, because you
An ordinance
could
is-
always at the end, I mean, this is, if the majority didn't want to publish in the paper, what they could propose, if they really supported transparency, is that at the end of the year when the annual newsletter comes out, that all of those ordinances that had only been summary published in the newspaper, that they publish them in full in the annual newsletter that goes out to all the residents. And what better way to make sure that everybody's got the new ordinances in their hand? But the cost then of that would probably be more than publishing it simply in the legal notices section of the newspaper like everybody else does.
Well, I don't think you have to publish every publication in total, but some that are directly affect a lot of people, and especially some of the older people are selling their land and selling it off.
Yes.
It's really important. Now, the other thing to note is for a summary publication, you have to have a 4/5 vote. So this next clip is about the vote, so if we could play that clip, please.
Summary publication, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed?
No.
Loren?
I'll go with, we can summarize that one.
Okay, so it's going to go 4-1 there. Yeah, that's a really long one, Loren. I think that, in keeping with your prior comments, I think that's a great decision on your part.
It's really ironic because they agree with so many of my decisions, but they won't let me go forward with many things, and you'll see what happens when we get to the hydrovac.
So in the end, how did the vote go through?
Well, it means that the solar gardens is going to have a summary publication because it's many, many pages, and there's very few people that are going to be affected by it.
Right.
You know, who's going to have a solar garden? You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
Or it's solar. So it's pretty cut and dry. Next thing, though, is we're talking about a grading permit.
Oh, so now we're coming up to our current update on the hydrovac situation.
No, this kind of indirectly, because he was using a grading permit under the guise of hydrovac. But what's interesting about this, again, what I want to come back to, it's the will of the majority, but the voice of the minority. And we're going to hold this up, and you can see the changes in the grading permit. There were holes in the old grading permit big enough to drive a semi through.
Right, and we covered that on a previous program,
Well,
that grading permit.
I finally got an actual copy of the new one. So if we could play the next clip, please, and we'll talk on the other side.
The draft is before you, was included in your packets. The only change per staff is recommending a language change to the grading permit. As you remember, the grading permit itself was changed for council direction. That was tightened up a little bit. The previous fee schedules referred to an escrow with a grading permit as dependent upon a number of yards. The city engineer is recommending that the grading permit escrow be required for all grading permits. The escrow would be in place to cover any of the inspection costs and or enforcement issues that we have recently had. So that would be required per the city engineer is recommending that. That escrow, after the project is completed and restoration is complete, a site visit is done, would be returned.
Okay.
For our viewers out there who may have missed our previous programs, the grading permit that we're talking about originally only listed a couple of things that was going to be done. That there was going to be the grading of the land to do some reclamation, to do some cleaning out of the pond so that the ducks could be there, and to filter out rocks and gravel. In essence, though, what happened is that big holding ponds were created, man-made, so that the hydrovacing company could be dumping their contents of the hydrovac trucks into those holding ponds. And on these programs, we have shown film footage of the extent of that shoveling of the land. And Councilmember Loren Sederstrom has been very instrumental in bringing this to the attention of not only his city council, but to the watershed district
And the MPCA.
And the MPCA, that this was totally contrary to what the grading permit was. And as we talked about on our last program, the city attorney of Grant finally issued a letter,
Cease and desist.
saying that they had to do some reclamation of what they did for the disturbances to the land. And now, this is now the amendment to that grading permit, which you heard then. It has expanded greatly as to the conditions that the city has placed on it, sort of after the horses have left the barn. But nonetheless, that grading permit has been amended.
Absolutely, and here is an example. One of the things that says on here, how many yards are being taken care of. It says, if importing fill, provide the location where it's coming from. If removing, where is it being hauled? What is the restoration plan? They have 13 conditions on this grading permit that was not there before. I won't go through all of them. They have to have site plans. All imported materials come from a clean source and should MPCA requirements of unregulated film. It shall be conducted 7 to 7 Monday through Friday, and they had brought one in 8:30 on a Saturday night. 48-hour notice prior to work starting. It has had to have the NPDES permit from the MPCA if it's more than 1 acre. There has a letter of credit or cash escrow for $1,500 prior to work. One of the things I was jumping up and down about, we have to know where this stuff is coming from. Those 6 trucks on a Saturday night came from 3M, the chemical research building, when they were taking dirt from underneath because all the utilities were being eaten up by acid. Well, we want to dump that in the ground and let it go into our drinking water? So
Right, because you're thinking there must have been something in the dirt if the wiring and the other utilities underneath the building were being corroded. What were they being corroded by?
Acid, I believe.
Doesn't
We
that
don't
make
know.
sense? Doesn't that make sense that you'd want to know then what was in that dirt?
Well, the other thing I want to point out is we have, if you go on Facebook, go to the Grant Reporter. That has some things that are going on there. There's a very cute article on there called The Grinch of Grant, and it says Mayor Jeff Huber's Grinch list of deeds in 2017, and it outlines some of his activities.
And that is a publication of a resident of Grant,
That's
correct?
right. That's the
Not yourself.
No, I don't do that. I just visit the website to see the interesting stories. But it's a cute caricature, and there also is a 3 segments of video that you can play at the end of, I believe it's the mayor including an attorney, to sit down and be quiet. So you might find it somewhat entertaining. So now I guess we're on to the next clip, if we can. We'll talk on the other side.
The no votes,
Larry was no.
the only one. I would also like to interject, the first comment that Councilmember Lanu had was tree service and Excel.
Yes.
There's information in your
In the
packet
packet.
on Excel, and I will update you on the tree service.
Yeah. Thought I saw that as well. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Now, the city of Grant has a contract with the tree service because obviously
Well, actually-
there's a lot of trees in Grant and road right-of-ways that have to be maintained,
Well,
correct?
actually what it is they have a trimmer, but he doesn't do much. And what Mr. Lanu is suggesting is either the tree services come out and cut for XL Energy. But why just take the top of the trees off? Why not pass an ordinance that allows one of the tree trimming services they use to take the whole scrub brush off? So why just cut the top 3 feet off? Why not cut it off at the base? And that will do 2 things. First of all, they won't have to come out and trim it because it's gone. And secondly, they can chip it and get rid of it right there. And number 2, it will save the city a vast amount of money. But once again, this is an excellent idea, but because it comes from the minority, it's like pushing a boulder uphill to get anything done, because if they can't take credit for it, or if it comes from the minority, it's not a good idea. So that's so the next one we're going to talk about is Mr. Lanu is suggesting we get a planner engineer from one company like we used to have. That way that could eliminate staff meetings or greatly decrease them, because the planner isn't from one company, the engineer isn't from another. That person would have the expertise both in planning, creating ordinances, in zoning, as well as the engineering, knowing exactly the roads and the requirements to do improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So let's watch that clip.
Does your service offer engineering?
No.
So you can't offer a planner/engineer in-house so that when we have staff meetings, the councilmen are not allowed to attend, and so you charge, obviously, to come to a
Is there
city
another
council
question,
meeting.
Larry?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's the
I
same
just want to know if
question.
there's another question.
You obviously attend council meetings, planning commission meetings, and staff meetings. Now, if we combine it like we have in the past, we'd save, as the mayor said, we want to save all this money. We'd be saving all kinds of money if we had it in-house. And I think this community's not that big. I think it was well-served when he did it before. So I would entertain at this time tabling your appointment until we look into having.
For our viewers out there, I want to let them know that this is actually the first meeting in January, this month.
First meeting of the year, when
that-
the appointment list is put out, And we make all these appointments. We have to do the newspaper, the clerk, we have to go through the appointment list. And so that's what they were talking about, and he was making the suggestion that we change something. And of course,
Well, and that would certainly, I mean, this idea of tabling it, what that does is that it would give the council time to have maybe further time to consider the suggestion, or maybe look into what the cost-benefit analysis might be. Maybe it's changed since when the city of Grant did this before in the past. It's hard to know. And so it certainly would be appropriate to have made that motion to table, but as you indicated, that was not passed.
oh, absolutely not. But we did get through most of it. That one of the things that's interesting too, talking about that appointment list, they have to certify the newspaper. And there's two things you have to understand. First of all, they're supposed to have a circulation of 75% of the residents of the city that's your official newspaper. Second of all, as I understand, it has to be unanimous by the council. It has to be unanimous vote, which it wasn't, and we're going to talk about that. So if we can play that next clip, we will talk on the other side.
White Bear Press does not reach 75% of the households in Grant. It doesn't. Several years ago, this very council, I wasn't on were we on the board when we changed legal newspapers? I guess they did approve the Pioneer Press. That does reach a 75%. This is statute says it has to reach 75%. So I'd ask our attorney if indeed we can even use them if they don't reach 75%. I do know my experience with them as a White Bear Press prints a lot of articles without fact checking.
Okay, so there's the real nub of the problem right there, folks. I think we figured it out here.
I'm just going to tell you right up front, but if they don't meet that criteria
Okay.
that the statute requires, I don't know if we can appoint
Well,
them.
you've made your point. Now it's my turn here. It wasn't 5 minutes ago, sir, that you were telling us that the Pioneer Press was costing us so much money, and now you've done a complete 180 within the last 10 minutes, and now you're telling us that the Pioneer Press is the newspaper we should be using.
I'm just saying that the
well,
Pioneer
no,
Press
I'm
meets
talking.
statute.
Remember, we talked about one person at a time, and I let you have your time. So you're asking us now to transfer our legal newspaper over. Kim, we've talked. Hang on a second, Tom. Kim, we've talked about this before. I just want to chat with you real quick. And what information can you lend to this discussion? I believe you and I have talked about the White Bear Press and its coverage before. Do you remember that?
Mayor and council members, this was looked into several years ago. I don't have that current information. Maybe something has changed, but from my memory, the White Bear Press does cover smaller than 75% of Grant for a free newspaper. The White Bear Press is available to anybody in Grant with a subscription. They also have put out a box here that is billed every week, so people who do not want to get a subscription, that aren't delivered a free one put in their mailbox, can come to the town hall and pick one up.
Okay. So with that said, Tom, did you have a quick comment on this, and then we'll move forward here.
Well, ironically, when I'm thinking about whether or not if the White Bear Press is the appropriate press to use versus Pioneer, the Pioneer Press, my mind would be that neither are, in that I'm looking at what the zip code is for those folks who live in the city of Grant, and that's 55082. Now, for those of you who watch this program out of the Stillwater viewing area, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, what's my zip code in Stillwater here? 55082. Perhaps the Stillwater newspaper would be the appropriate newspaper.
Well, they do have two. There's the Valley Press, and there's also, I forget the other one that the White Bear Press puts out. But it's interesting because they put nothing about White Bear, about Grant in the publication, and the name escapes me right now, that they put out for Stillwater. Even though it goes to the eastern third, at least better than a third of that, there is nothing about that, and those people don't get it anyway. So it would be very interesting to have something done, but that's just the way it is. You know, and
So in the end, they took a vote, right? And which newspaper won out?
White Bear Press. Well, let's back up here so we understand this completely. Now, when we had the charter coming up, when we were presenting the charter, the year that it had to be published in total, the mayor, old Mayor Carr, and new Vice Mayor Huber, which they flip-flopped, they then switched it to the St. Paul Pioneer Press to publish the charter. Well, that cost, of course, you have to publish a whole charter, that cost $36,000. And they weren't bright enough to just contain it to the northern segment, because you can segment the advertising, you know. They had it published in the whole citywide St. Paul Pioneer Press as opposed to the Washington County division.
Oh,
well,
so the purpose was to jack up the price so they could get the constituents angry about the price tag, even though they manipulated it to get the highest price tag they could. And so politically, they could then use that as political fodder against the folks who wanted the Charter Commission.
By the way,
Wow, now that's political activism at its finest.
Yes, and it's interesting because the White Bear Press could have, published it for $3,400, and they chose to spend $36,000, over 10 times the amount. And every time you bring something up, oh, it's the money, it's the money. And I think we had the clip earlier this year when I worked with the clerk, and we meet in a 1914 schoolhouse, okay? 12-foot, 10-foot ceilings. And in the summer, May, June, July, August, and September, it can be very, very uncomfortable in there. And we brought a proposal forwards for $849. We found a company that would come out and put in a 3-room window air conditioner that would cool the area, and they voted it down because they didn't want to spend the money. But they spend $36,000 wasting $32,000 publishing it in this newspaper. So as they appear to be frugal and keep screaming, save money, don't look at what they say. You have to look at what they do. And it's very incongruent at times. It is not the same.
Well, that's why we show these clips on here on Off the Record News, so that you too can see what Councilmember Loren Sederstrom sees when he's doing his job for the city of Grant.
Well, the January meeting too, with all the thing on, the place was packed. I think I counted 8 or 9 people that actually attended the meeting.
That's pretty good, actually.
Well, it's marginal.
I mean, when you think about your population and that percentage of people of your population, that's a pretty good percent. That's higher than most city council meetings in other communities.
4,200 people we have approximately, and 9 show up. And interestingly, 3 were the Huber Carr cronies from the Planning Commission. So, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit later too, but we're now going to be talking, we finally get to this hydrovac, and we will see what happens and go from there. So if they could play that clip, please.
Would ask to forbear a little bit with me, because I'll be as brief as I can, but when I brought it up before, I've been interrupted and talked over. I've tried to provide documentation. I've had a lot of people contact me about this. I have phone calls. I've had people pulling in my yard. It is a very serious issue. And what I'm trying to do is keep this simple. We already have it in the zoning chart that we have no liquid waste. All I'm saying is we can very economically make an amendment to this. And I provided in the packet, I thought maybe it would be at the staff meeting. I attached a suggestion for amendments, and added some things, and then I gave a couple samples. And one of the things I did is I gave a definition. Hydrovac is a device using hydraulic water pressure to loosen the soil, after which a large vacuum sucks up the loose soil, slurry, and solids and deposits in a large tank attached to a trailer or tandem axle truck. They're used in utility excavation as well as cleaning up hazardous environmental spills. And that's one of the problems. 80 to 90% can be fine, but the problem is we have water quality. I've talked to issues. Jenny Yingling, who's the Department of Health, I've had multiple conversations with her, and she said there's 140,000 people in South Washington County that cannot drink their well water. Everybody here has well water. That's something we have to protect, because once it goes south, there's also a C14 dioxin that has just been discovered in the metropolitan area, which is a new pollutant. We haven't got to that yet. But the amended change, I was going to be brief. So all we have to do, and I'm sure legal and the engineer can flesh this out a little bit, but I did do some research and tried to be as succinct as possible with this amended change. No liquid or solid waste from a hydrovac vehicle may be released or deposited in the city of Grant, as these will be considered to be regulated fill as defined by the MPCA and not allowed. Penalties should start at $1,000 per incident or example, whatever you want to put, and escalate from there. So in other words, if we're having illegal dumping, this particular case, I have talked to Washington County Environmental, the MPCA, the Department of Health. The reason I notice it, it's across the street from me. And for example, there was a Saturday night, I had a neighbor come and verify this. 6 trucks pulled in on a Saturday night at 8:30, and I don't believe we could have construction going on that late. Is that right, Mr. Huber? We discussed that at one of the last meetings.
It's on the grading permit, which I don't have in front of me.
But what I'm saying is it's not allowed. So they're bringing it in after dark, and they're dumping it. It was followed from, it came from 3M Chemical Building, and it was verified not only by one of the people that followed the truck, but also by an employee that at the 260 Chemical Building, they were taking all the utilities out from because the utilities were getting corrupted by the ground. Okay, that isn't what we need in Grant. We all have drinking water issues. You know, in our ordinance currently says it on the chart that I tried to put up a meeting or two ago that I wasn't allowed to finish.
Loren, I'm going to stop you for a second.
Just
here.
1 second.
Well, you've explained to us why you'd like to do this, and you've made a lot of different claims. And maybe at the time we start to discuss it, I understand exactly what you're trying to do. You have done a succinct job of telling us what you're trying to do, up to and including the penalties here. So at this point, any more discussion of the personal issues on here is probably a little bit.
No more discussion of the personal issues, Mr. Sederstrom.
Well, I'm surprised I got 2.5 minutes out. I actually went to put the chart up an earlier meeting, and he talked over me, told me to sit down. He didn't want to see it or hear it, and
Right,
this was
and-
right out of the ordinances. It was
Right,
our
and
chart.
at our last show last month when we had you out here, you were going to attempt to get this on the agenda so that there could be more council discussion, and we were going to give our viewers an update on whether or not you were successful. Well, it looks like, you're moving forward, at least.
But it was not on the agenda. It was not an action item. The staff did not review it. I have too many clips to put on, but they said they're not going to leave it right now. It was too controversial. They were kind of indicating that they thought there were going to be lawsuits from this particular individual. One of the things that says in the grading permit is city officials are allowed to inspect the work. Not only that, the man did not have no trespassing signs up. If you do not want someone to access your property, you have to have no trespassing signs. And in fact, he didn't until later on. And I will, when we get to the another segment, we'll go more into it.
And here's the thing that I guess I want to just put in my 2 cents worth about this threat of litigation against the city from the company.
No, against me, not against the city.
Oh, against you, I see. So again, well, let's just even take a look at that hypothetically. Because first of all, what would be the claim? You as an elected person, you are looking out after the best interests of your community and your constituents. So there's a factor of regulation and enforcement. There's a grading permit. The grading permit is actually not being complied with by the person who was granted their grading application, correct? Mm-hmm. You are helping with that enforcement, and so they're going to sue you as an elected person for doing your job? Well, I would like to see how successful that claim would be in district court, because first of all, you have a certain amount of immunity in that you are doing your job. And you contacted the MPCA, you contacted other enforcement agencies to coordinate with this. And so the fact that somebody is claiming they're going to do litigation oftentimes is just hollow words.
What's more interesting is the city had issued a cease and desist order. Within less than 4 days after the cease and desist order was issued, I was letting the horses out at 6:30 in the morning, and I saw a hydrovac truck dumping. Now, they're not supposed to, first of all, in the grading permit, it's 7 in the morning till 7 at night, so it's out of the parameters. So I did, in fact, drive over there, and I did, in fact, walk on his property. By the way, there were no trespassing signs, okay? And I explained to him, as an official of the city, that there's a cease and desist order, you're not supposed to be dumping. I took the license number down, and he said, call the dispatcher. So then I promptly went home, called law enforcement to make a police report, and they went over there to do that. By that time, of course, the truck was gone. It only takes 10 minutes because, no, this is all liquid. They open up the back and dump it, and it's just a matter of moments for them to dump this.
Right, and I stand by my original observations.
Well, there's one more hydrovac clip on here. What I want to point out is how they're distorting the use and twisting the truth on this. They're saying that they're using a hydrovac to put in telephone poles. Absolutely not. I have seen XL Energy come out many times, and they have a huge auger on their boom truck, and that's what they put them in with. It could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't, but I would say for the most part, they do not use a hydrovac truck to drill a hole to put in a telephone pole. So let's look at this clip, and we'll talk on the other side.
Say that you can't use hydrovacs in the city of Grant. It says that you cannot discharge. So citizens, if they have an issue that need to use this type of a technology, they could in fact use a hydrovac to work on their utilities. But what it does do is it protects our water system, because already it says in our ordinances there can be no liquid waste within 1,000 yards, which is 3,000 feet, of a well. And so all we'd have to do is add this very simply to the chart, zoning 32-245, add one more line, put this in there. It would be very minimal, it would be very easy. In terms of a publication, it would be next to no cost there, and it would protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. Because I don't know anybody, did anybody in here not drink?
Loren, we're not, let's not start. We got the picture.
And he goes on to say, well, I see them do that, put in a pole, they just go out there and hydrovac a hole, and it doesn't happen. Nobody goes out in the middle of the field.
And I would say that while that may be one minor use, that's not going to keep a hydrovac company in business long if the only major work that they have is drilling a hole for utility poles, considering that here in the metro area, most of the utility poles are already installed.
Well, and they're going to underground utilities.
Exactly. And there's this drive to, certainly in the first and second ring suburbs, to put the utilities underground and to get rid of the poles. So there, I guess I'm along with you there, Mr. Sederstrom, not to buy that. Now, one thing that I want to share with our viewers is that oftentimes, and I've been an elected official, so I know that that when you're in the spotlight, that there sometimes be people that they have misconceptions about who you might be, who you are, what your stand is. Sometimes they get a little aggressive towards you, and as an elected official, it's just part of the territory. You just have to kind of shrug it off and make the best of it and go about your business, because that's part of public service, is that you take the good with the bad. But occasionally, it gets a little close to home, and Mr. Sederstrom had an event that happened not long ago where he was at his home, actually was in a sound sleep at his home, when he was confronted by somebody very angry, very distraught, banging down his door practically, trying to get into his house. And of course, coming out of a sound sleep, one's hard pressed to wonder what is going on here until you realize it is actually somebody who is very angry and hostile, trying to enter your home and maybe perhaps do you harm. So, but the point that I want to bring up about this is that it is then ill-placed for then fellow council members at council meetings to then bring up those issues and try to use them again for political fodder. And it's sort of like what you were talking about, Mr. Sederstrom, about, you know, spending that $36,000 at the Pioneer Press when they're talking about how they don't want to spend money, but they overspent it by $32,000 just so they could have political fodder against those that they disagree with. Well, this is one of those same kind of situations where well, let's show the clip and see what it is on the other side, and then we'll come back and we'll share the police report with you.
The company and the resident here several times. There's been some intrusions onto their property. There's been trespassing. We've had council members walking through this gentleman's property. I believe someone pulled a gun on one of his employees. I can't remember who did that. It was someone. One of you two, I believe, did that. Yeah. One of these two pulled a gun on one of the guy's employees.
Excuse me right now.
Did you or did you not pull a gun?
Wait, I'm going to define that. When I have someone threatening me, banging on my door and screaming at me, refusing to leave my property, I have the right to tell him to leave. And if you read the police report completely, read the police report, you will see what happened. Right. So don't blow smoke and twist it around, okay?
As you can see, Mayor Huber has decided to twist an unfortunate event where somebody was accosting Councilmember Loren Sederstrom and turning it around and trying to make it sound like Councilmember Loren Sederstrom was accosting them. And of course, that is very contrary to the truth. We actually have the police report because the police were called on this because it was a very serious issue.
I called them, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
It was crazy. It is very disturbing when, you know, all I have, I open the door to see what's going on. All I have between me and this very angry, animated individual is a little storm door. And he's screaming and yelling, his eyes are bulging, and you know, what? And you just leave. You shout at him and tell him to leave, but go ahead, read the report, and you'll see.
Right, so this happened on October 20th, 2017. And as I had indicated, this does indicate that Councilmember Loren Sederstrom was at home, had been at home for many hours prior to the incident, had been asleep, and when the police officer came, he filled out a full report of what was going on. And it does say here that it turns out that this employee, this individual who was ramming down Loren Sederstrom's door, mistook Councilmember Sederstrom for Councilmember Lanou and was actually at the wrong house. However, the individual didn't know that, and he was intent upon causing mayhem at the residence that he thought he was Mr. Lanou's house. And so, of course, it says here that Sederstrom did admit that he did take out his gun. Keep in mind, he was in his own home being accosted by somebody, and that Sederstrom, it should be noted that Sederstrom does have a permit to carry and was in his house at the time of the gun pointing. And it goes on, there will be no charges in this case as no crime had occurred. So you see, there's no crime in what happened during the incident as it regards Councilmember Sederstrom. And so again, it goes to this issue of council members on a council in bad faith, using incidences, twisting them around in a way that's for political fodder that they can just twist around into rumors and innuendo. And it's something to be concerned about and to be aware of, and so that when you hear these kinds of things, to think to yourself, gee whiz, does this make any sense? Let's get the real data and find out what really happened. So thank you, Mr. Sederstrom, for bringing that forward to clarify that.
And you think this would be done, okay? I made a police report, I'm an official record. So one day I'm coming home, I'm carrying a load in the back of my pickup truck, and I'm going slow because I'm going down a gravel road. And I see this individual parked on the street. He had just evidently met with they gave him an order of restoration and gave him 6 or 7 days to restore all these piles of dirt and finish it up. Well, he evidently had it was the same day, and I was unaware of that. I was coming home from St. Francis, which is north of Anoka, with a load of things in the back of my truck. And I see this man's, Morehouse's truck. He's parked at the end of the dirt road. And so I don't think anything of it. I'm just going along 25, 30 miles an hour, driving very carefully. And I did look over, and he has his window down like he's going to shout at me, and I don't want to engage this individual. I've had 2 or 3 occurrences with him where he came to my house and yelled and screamed at me, and I will not engage him. I go in the house. I'm not going to get in this type of confrontation. So what happens then is I'm driving at 25, 30 miles an hour, and he's at a dead stop pointing the opposite direction. He puts his pickup truck in reverse and very rapidly backs up to the end of his property where there's a turnaround, and then follows me. Well, I'm turning the corner and see, oh, this guy's coming after me. I want nothing to do with him. He's not. I think he's not terribly rational. He's volatile, and I don't want to deal with it. So I quickly went in my driveway, went in the house rapidly, and I'm just shut both doors, locked them. Hey, I'm not going to deal with this guy. And so then he stops, lingers out, 2 or 3 stops in front of my property, and, like looking menacingly, and I'm going, I'm not going to show my face. I don't want anything to do with it. I just so called the police, and this was on 11/28, the police report. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the police. So I made another police report. So this is an ongoing situation. I hope it will be resolved. But what can you say? I just have to see what happens. And again, it's very interesting. Mr. Ultra-Conservative Huber is basically challenging my Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Isn't that interesting? That and many people in Grant are hunters. They have arms. I know several female or ladies. They have a concealed carry. It just makes them feel more secure because you are in the country. The other thing is we have Cedar Ridge Residential Treatment Center about a mile down the road. And there's just recently, within the last month, been an escape from there. It's a chemical dependency treatment center. And there have been several situations of violence. And if you're living there, you want to take care. One lady had to ward one of those escapees off with a pitchfork. Oh. So again, there's pluses and minuses to living in the country. 99.5%, it's wonderful, but there's that rare occurrence when you have to be aware and keep your eyes open and you have to protect yourself. So
Right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Sederstrom, for bringing that forward so that we could certainly clarify what had happened there and to dispel any rumors and innuendo that Mayor Huber is attempting to disseminate.
Well, let's go to the next clip and we can talk on the other side.
To the merits of the subject in front of us. And at this point, there is this suggested change to the ordinance which attempts to capture the question or the deposit of material, maybe from industrial sites, maybe not, that are contained or collected by a hydrovac vehicle. I don't know that the hydrovac vehicle is the proper test for capturing this thing, but I think it is a fair and good inquiry for council to determine if its grading permit and the regulations that attach to that need a little bit of enhancement to capture regulated waste, industrial type waste, and And I think if it's council's view that you'd like a written recommendation from us on that, or from the planner or somebody else, we could certainly do that. And our point is ultimately gonna focus on the upshot of industrial waste, whether it's collected in a hydrovac vehicle or otherwise, is maybe perhaps secondary to the fundamental inquiry, which is, what are you putting on the ground? Where did it come from? And what do we need to know and do about it, or do to prevent it? And so if, with council's leave, we could do a short opinion on that and maybe kick off the council's further analysis of how to regulate.
Well, let me.
And I think your new attorney has really got to the heart of what the key issue is. It's not what type of vehicle is used to transmit that industrial waste or potential industrial waste or discharge. It is the transfer of that material itself. Because you could use a wheelbarrow and it would be the same end in mind if you had it'd be mini wheelbarrows.
Well,
but it is the content of what's in that discharge.
Oh, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. If you had a wheelbarrow, considering Grant is rural, you'd be pushing it a long way. But nonetheless, this is something that we have to deal with. Maybe I approach it from the wrong attitude of hydrovac, but what's very interesting in reading the grading permit, any fill that is brought in has to have a determined source. So basically, you have to tell where it comes from.
Yes.
You know, so that's very important. And I don't think they fully understand this yet. I didn't get this grading permit until I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, so I could actually review it. It was never brought back to us at the city council to view, so we don't know what's there. But going over it completely, and so I skimmed many of the items, they covered a lot of the ground. The staff did an excellent job of closing all the loopholes that they had in there. The other issue that was never even discussed, this was a commercial operation. It wasn't one person bringing a couple in because I needed some dirt with a little bit of sewer in it so it grow things. This was a commercial operation, a commercial dumping operation, which is not allowed in Grant. And they never even talked about the commercial aspect of it. Once again, they conveniently skirt this in. And he calls me Chicken Little because the sky is falling. Well, I've had 10, 15 people contact me regarding this, and they're very concerned. So, but it's interesting how they don't want to do anything, and this is a very imminent issue that
Yes.
It's hard to comprehend.
Yes. Now set it up for our next clip,
Okay,
Mr. Sederstrom.
this is when they're talking about the purposes of a hydro.
A hydrovac truck does not just dig holes for telephone poles. I was at a site recently, and the hydrovac dump was cleaning up a septic spill. If you look at anybody who's got a hydrovac truck and they have advertisement, they will tell you that their purpose is to clean up environmental spills. So that by its own definition, they're the one defining what they do with it. And when the materials come from 3M and they come from septic spills and they come from other hazardous locations, it's not like a milk truck that delivers milk 5 days a week. They're not allowed to deliver gasoline on the weekends. You don't know what's in there. You don't get a manifest. The driver don't know where he's going before he gets assigned an hour before, because if the hazard didn't occur the day before so he can get a manifest for it, he's going to drive out as the thing occurs. And he's going to load that truck up, and he's going to the first place he can to dump. That's why I implore that the city direct our staff, listen to our attorney, and start looking into it. We don't have to accept the language Loren has written in here, but we certainly have to do our due diligence to protect our water supply, because if we do not, the two realtors up here will bring Met Council sworn water
please,
right
what
down
I do
the road.
Now, that was Councilmember Larry Lanou who was giving his comments there with regard to the uses that he's aware of for hydrovac trucks. Now, we are coming down to the last couple minutes of our program, and I know that, Mr. Sederstrom, you wanted to finish out with some public comment. for
Oh, we
our
have a-
program, so set that up for
Well,
us.
okay, what has happened is we used to have public comment and it was videotaped and put on the beginning of the meeting. Now, they weren't happy with some of the comments that were made, and I granted some of them are politically charged, but that's the way it is. You know, if you can't stand the heat, you get out of the kitchen. So then they do not have public comment videotape. Now, many times there isn't anything significant, but sometimes there is significant information that should be gleaned from public comment, and the members of this community should be made aware of what's going on. And here's an example. So play this clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Came up with some valuable information to the residents about the burning permits. You know, and residents aren't going to be able to see that. Now, that would have been a very effective method to extend his message to the whole city. And I think it was a very good message to bring up here, and thank you for doing that. And I think it would have been great if it would have been viewed so all the residents could have saw it. It was providing a public service, but now, unless you were here, you haven't heard that.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yep, no.
Good comments. And you know, what I find for many people is that the highlight of their council meetings that they watch for their own communities is being able to hear what other folks in the community have to say at public comment, that they want to hear what other members of their community are thinking.
Well, what was interesting, I cut the clip short because I thought we had a lot of clips. One of the things he said, oh, and I agree with you, it's very important information, blah, 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 blah. So at the end with public, I forced him into re-announcing that burning permits were not required because we had over 3 inches of snow. But it did say that they should call the police department. Well, they said the fire department, but it says in the burning permit you call the police department, and they will notify all the individuals. So recently, I had a fire. I have a small orchard, and I have trees in my 40-plus acres. And so I put the trimmings, and I also store my round bales on pallets, because horses are very sensitive to mold, so you don't want them on the ground, which will suck up moisture and create mold. And unfortunately, when you use them a number of years, they get broken. You have to throw them away, get new ones. And a good way to get rid of them is to burn them. Now, if you go back to early colonial America, they used to actually bring boatloads of ashes back as fertilizer to England. So it's not anti-environmental if you're burning wood and leaves and those types of things. It's also a good way to get rid of your old Christmas tree if you have one that's a live one. But anyway, so that's what I did, and I just made one phone call, burned my fire. It was done in a short time. But again, this is an illustration of the value of public comment. If, for example, there's a big pothole and the roads in Grant are terrible, the biggest joke in Washington County from a roadway perspective is McCusick Road. There was one young gal that was turning around and she had to go back into the service, and she had a flat tire. It split her tire open. And she didn't have a spare, so they had to have the police come out again and help her. But that's how bad the roads are. And what we're trying to do is get them repaired. I won't reiterate the road thing that we could have had it fixed for $130,000, but they refused to even think about it. They told the residents it was going to be $400,000 for a rebuild. But you know, once again, this is the do nothing. Oh, we can't do anything. We can't do anything. The interesting thing is they put guardrails on an old dirt road that didn't need them. So turn it over to you.
Well, we have so much to cover because for a small community, there's so much going on. And I do appreciate you coming out, Mr. Sederstrom, giving us an update for this January 2018 and the new year, kicking off the new year with our new program lineup. And viewers out there, thank you for tuning in to Off the Record News. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.